The wind howled across the barren surface of the alien planet, carrying with it fine grains of red dust that stung like needles. The sky above was a deep shade of purple, streaked with jagged bolts of lightning that lit up the horizon but brought no rain. It was a harsh and unforgiving world, one where life struggled to survive, and yet here they were. A group of insectoid creatures stood in a loose circle around a motionless figure lying face down on the ground. Their exoskeletons shimmered faintly under the dim light, reflecting shades of green and black. They moved with careful precision, their movements sharp and deliberate, as if every step had been rehearsed. These were the krill, an advanced species, known for their brutal efficiency and cold logic, and today they believed they had achieved something significant. At the center of their formation lay Daniel Harper, or what appeared to be his lifeless body. His gray combat suit was torn in, several places revealing scorched skin beneath. A thin trail of blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, pooling into the dirt. His breathing, if there was any, was so shallow it couldn't be seen by the naked eye. To all appearances, he was dead. Zixar, the krill commander, stepped forward, his mandibles clicking softly as he surveyed the scene. He was larger than the others, his armored carapace marked with intricate patterns that signified his rank. His multifaceted eyes scanned the area, taking in every detail. There was no doubt in his mind that this human had been eliminated. After hours of tracking him through the treacherous terrain, setting traps and finally cornering him in a narrow canyon, victory was theirs. He fought well, Zixar said, his voice a series of guttural clicks translated into something resembling speech by his translator device. But even the strongest prey falls eventually. One of the soldiers tilted its head, antennae twitching. Are you certain he is dead? Humans are unpredictable. Zixar snorted, a sound more like a hiss. His heart has stopped, his brain activity is gone, he is no longer a threat. Still, he gestured to two of his subordinates. Check him, make sure. The two krill approached cautiously, their weapons still trained on the prone figure. One prodded Daniel's side with the tip of its spear-like weapon, while the other bent down to inspect his neck for a pulse. Neither noticed the faint flicker of light emanating from a small panel embedded in Daniel's suit near his chest. Beneath the surface of his armor, tiny circuits hummed quietly, maintaining the illusion of death. Daniel wasn't dead, far from it. In fact, he was acutely aware of everything happening around him. The cloaking system built into his combat suit was designed to mimic death, slowing his heartbeat and suppressing his brainwaves to levels undetectable by most scanning equipment. It was a desperate measure, but one that had saved his life countless times before. Now it gave him the advantage he needed. Through microcameras hidden in his helmet, Daniel watched the krill move around him. He noted their positions, their posture, the way they communicated silently through subtle shifts in their antennae. Every detail mattered. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. If he made a single wrong move, if he revealed himself too soon, it would mean the end, not just for him, but for everyone counting on him back at the human base. High above the planet, orbiting silently among the stars, Captain Rachel Dawson sat in the command center of the orbital station. She stared at the holographic display in front of her, her jaw tightening as she read the report. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear. Daniel Harper, one of humanity's best operatives, was presumed killed in action during a mission on the alien planet below. Rachel leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She had worked alongside Daniel for years, trusted him implicitly, and now she found herself struggling to accept the news. He was relentless, resourceful, and far too stubborn to die easily. Something about this didn't sit right with her. "Captain," came a hesitant voice from behind her. It was Lieutenant Marcus Hale, one of her junior officers. "Orders have come in. Command wants us to stand down. They say it's over." Rachel turned sharply, fixing Marcus with a steely gaze. "Over? You really believe that?" Marcus hesitated, shifting uncomfortably under her scrutiny. "Well, I mean, the krill confirmed his death. What else can we do?" "We don't abandon our people," Rachel snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. Not unless we're absolutely sure. She stood abruptly, pacing across the room. Her thoughts raced. The Krill weren't stupid. They wouldn't declare victory unless they were confident. But Daniel was unlike anyone else. If there was even the slightest chance he was still alive, she owed it to him, and to humanity, to find out. Down on the planet, the Krill finished their examination and declared the human truly dead. Satisfied, Zixar ordered his troops to gather samples from the surrounding area. They needed evidence to present to their superiors, proof that they had neutralized such a dangerous adversary. As the soldiers dispersed, Zixar lingered for a moment, staring down at Daniel's body. "You were clever," he muttered, "but cleverness only gets you so far." With that, he turned and followed his team toward their transport ship, leaving Daniel alone once again. For several long minutes, silence reigned. The only sounds were the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional gust of wind whipping across the desolate landscape. Inside his suit, Daniel waited patiently. He knew better than to act rashly. The Krill might have left the immediate vicinity, but they weren't far away. He needed to time his next move perfectly. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to reactivate his suit's systems. The cloaking mechanism powered down, allowing his vitals to return to normal. His lungs expanded as he drew in a deep breath, filling his body with oxygen once more. When he was certain the coast was clear, Daniel rolled onto his side and pushed himself up into a crouch. His muscles screamed in protest after hours of forced immobility, but he ignored the pain. Carefully, he retrieved a compact scanner from his belt and swept it around the area. The device picked up faint energy signatures in the distance, confirming that the Krill hadn't gone far. He tapped a button on his wrist communicator, attempting to establish contact with the orbital base. Static crackled in response. The Krill must have set up some kind of interference field, blocking outgoing transmissions. Daniel cursed under his breath. Without backup, he was on his own. For a moment, he considered retreating to safer ground. But then he remembered why he was here in the first place. Intelligence reports had indicated that the Krill were planning something big, something that could threaten entire human colonies. Whatever it was, it had to be stopped. And if he didn't stop it, no one else would. Taking a deep breath, Daniel adjusted the settings on his suit, ensuring it would blend seamlessly with the environment. Then, moving with practiced stealth, he began to follow the trail left by the Krill. Each step took him closer to danger, but also closer to answers. Somewhere out there, hidden beneath the alien soil, lay the key to humanity's survival. And Daniel Harper wasn't about to let anything or anyone stand in his way. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the alien planet into an eerie darkness broken only by the faint glow of bioluminescent plants scattered across the landscape. Daniel Harper moved cautiously through the shadows, his every step calculated, to avoid detection. The Krill were still nearby. Their transport ship sat parked in a shallow crater about half a mile away, its engines humming softly as it powered down for the night. Daniel adjusted the settings on his suit's camouflage system, ensuring it blended perfectly with the dim light. He knew he couldn't afford to make a mistake. If the Krill spotted him now, everything he'd worked for would be lost. His mission was clear: find out what they were planning and stop them before it was too late. As he crept closer to the crater, he noticed something unusual, a series of faint footprints leading away from the ship and toward a rocky outcrop in the distance. They weren't made by Krill feet, but by something smaller, more human-like. Curiosity tugged at him, and he decided to investigate. Whatever, or whoever, had left those prints might hold answers. It didn't take long for Daniel to reach the outcrop. Hidden behind a cluster of jagged rocks was a narrow opening, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. He hesitated for a moment, scanning the area for any signs of danger. When he saw none, he activated the flashlight on his wrist and stepped inside. The tunnel was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of earth and decay. As he ventured deeper, the walls became smoother, almost artificial. Someone or something had carved this passage deliberately. After several minutes of walking, the tunnel opened up into a cavernous chamber illuminated by glowing crystals embedded in the ceiling. And there, chained to the far wall, was a young woman. She looked up as Daniel entered, her eyes widening in surprise. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt, and her blonde hair hung limply over her shoulders. She wore tattered civilian clothes, and her hands were bound tightly with metallic cuffs that glowed faintly blue, an energy restraint used by the Krill. "Who are you?" she whispered hoarsely, her voice trembling. "I'm here to help," Daniel replied quietly, keeping his tone calm and reassuring. "My name is Daniel Harper. I'm with the Interstellar Defense Corps." The woman blinked, clearly struggling to process what she was hearing. "You're human?" "Yes," Daniel said, nodding. "And so are you, I assume?" She nodded weakly. "Emily Shaw. I was captured during a raid on New Haven. They brought me here. I don't know why." Daniel knelt beside her, examining the restraints around her wrists. "We'll figure that out later. Right now, we need to get you out of here." Emily shook her head. "You can't just break these cuffs. They're keyed to the Krill's systems. You'll trigger an alarm if you try." Daniel frowned. She was right. The last thing they needed was to draw attention. Instead, he pulled out a small device from his belt, a universal hacking tool, and attached it to the side of one of the cuffs. The screen lit up, displaying lines of code as the tool worked to bypass the security protocols. While the device did its job, Daniel glanced at Emily. "Do you know anything about what the Krill are doing here? Why they attacked New Haven?" Emily hesitated, her expression growing darker. "I overheard some of them talking. They mentioned something about a weapon, a biological weapon, something designed specifically to target humans." Daniel's blood ran cold. A bioweapon targeting humans. That explained why the Krill had been so aggressive lately. If they managed to deploy such a weapon, it could spell disaster for colonies across the galaxy. Before he could respond, the hacking tool emitted a soft beep, signaling success. The cuffs clicked open, freeing Emily's hands. She rubbed her sore wrists, wincing slightly as circulation returned. "Thanks," she murmured. "But we're not safe yet. There's a whole army of those things outside." "I know," Daniel said grimly. "But we're not leaving empty-handed. We need to find out more about this weapon and destroy it if we can." Emily hesitated, then nodded. "If you're going after them, I want to help." "You're in no condition to fight," Daniel pointed out. "But you can guide me. Do you know where their main facility is?" She thought for a moment, then gestured toward another tunnel branching off from the chamber. "There's a larger complex further underground. That's where they've been spending most of their time. It's heavily guarded, though." Daniel stood, helping Emily to her feet. "Then we'll have to be careful." Together, they made their way through the second tunnel, moving as quietly as possible. The passage twisted and turned, descending deeper into the planet's crust until the air grew noticeably warmer. Eventually, they reached a large metal door reinforced with heavy bolts. Through a crack in the frame, Daniel could see flickering lights and hear the faint hum of machinery. "This must be it," he whispered to Emily. "Stay close." He activated the thermal imaging feature on his helmet, using it to scan the other side of the door. The display revealed multiple heat signatures, Krill soldiers patrolling the corridors beyond. This wasn't going to be easy. After studying the layout for a few moments, Daniel turned to Emily. "Once we're inside, stick to the shadows. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary." "Got it?" She nodded nervously. "Got it." With that, Daniel pressed a button on his suit, activating a short-range EMP burst designed to disable electronic locks temporarily. The door hissed open, revealing a high-tech command center filled with glowing screens, control panels, and rows of data servers. Krill technicians scurried about, oblivious to the intruders slipping into the room. Daniel and Emily moved quickly, sticking to the edges of the space. Daniel kept his weapon drawn, ready to act if anyone noticed them. Meanwhile, Emily pointed to a large terminal in the center of the room. "That's where they've been working on the weapon," she whispered. Daniel nodded and approached the terminal cautiously. He connected his hacking tool to the console, downloading files and schematics onto a portable drive. The information scrolled across the screen faster than he could read it, but he caught glimpses of horrifying details: genetic codes, dispersal methods, casualty projections. This weapon wasn't just dangerous, it was apocalyptic. Suddenly, an alarm blared overhead, piercing the silence. Red lights flashed throughout the room as Krill soldiers rushed in, weapons raised. Daniel cursed under his breath. One of the technicians must have noticed the unauthorized access. "Time to go," he shouted to Emily. They sprinted toward the exit, dodging blasts of energy fired by the Krill. Daniel returned fire, taking down 2 soldiers blocking their path. Behind him, Emily stumbled, nearly falling, but Daniel grabbed her arm and yanked her forward. They burst back into the tunnels, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Daniel knew they wouldn't be able to outrun the Krill indefinitely. They needed a plan, and fast. "There's a reactor core powering this entire facility," Emily panted as they ran. "If we overload it, we can destroy the weapon and buy ourselves some time." Daniel considered this for a split second. Overloading the reactor would mean certain death for anyone left inside, including themselves if they didn't escape in time. But it was their only option. "Lead the way," he said firmly. Emily nodded and took off down a different branch of the tunnel, leading them toward the heart of the facility. Behind them, the Krill closed in, their angry clicks reverberating through the narrow passages. When they finally reached the reactor chamber, Daniel wasted no time. He accessed the control panel and initiated the overload sequence, setting the countdown timer for 5 minutes. The machine began to whine ominously, its core glowing brighter with each passing second. "We need to move," Daniel urged, grabbing Emily's hand. They raced back the way they came, the walls shaking violently as the reactor destabilized. The Krill were hot on their heels, firing relentlessly, but Daniel and Emily pushed forward, driven by sheer adrenaline. They emerged into the cavern where they'd first met. Daniel paused to glance back. The entrance to the reactor chamber collapsed in a fiery explosion, sealing the fate of the Krill facility and the deadly weapon within. Breathing heavily, Daniel turned to Emily. "Good work. Now let's get out of here." But even as they hurried toward the surface, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only temporary. The Krill wouldn't give up so easily. Humanity's fight was far from over. The explosion echoed through the tunnels like a thunderclap, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Daniel Harper and Emily Shaw stumbled out of the cavern, their bodies battered, but alive. The reactor core was gone, along with the Krill's deadly weapon. For now, humanity had been spared, but Daniel knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Outside, the alien landscape stretched endlessly before them, bathed in the pale light of the planet's twin moons. The air was cooler now, almost refreshing, after the stifling heat of the underground facility. Emily leaned against a boulder, catching her breath while Daniel scanned the horizon for signs of danger. His suit's sensors picked up faint energy readings, likely remnants of the Krill transport ship still parked nearby. "We need to keep moving," Daniel said, his voice low but firm. "The Krill will regroup soon. We can't afford to stay here." Emily nodded weakly, pushing herself upright. Her legs wobbled under her weight, but she forced herself to take a step forward. "Where do we go from here?" Daniel pointed toward a cluster of jagged hills in the distance. "There's an old human outpost about 10 miles that way. If it hasn't been destroyed, it might have supplies, and maybe even a way to contact my team." Emily hesitated, glancing back at the smoking ruins of the Krill facility. "Do you think they'll follow us?" "They always do," Daniel replied grimly. "But they won't expect us to head straight for the outpost. It's our best shot." With that, they began their trek across the barren terrain. The journey was grueling. Every step sent sharp rocks biting into their boots, and the thin atmosphere made breathing difficult. Despite the harsh conditions, Daniel kept a steady pace, urging Emily to push through the pain. He knew time was not on their side. After hours of relentless walking, the first rays of sunlight began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The sight was beautiful, but neither Daniel nor Emily had the energy to appreciate it. They were exhausted, dehydrated, and running on sheer willpower alone. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the abandoned outpost. It was little more than a collection of rusted metal structures half buried in sand, their windows shattered and walls pockmarked with blast marks. But to Daniel, it looked like salvation. "Stay close," he warned Emily as they approached the main building. "We don't know what's waiting for us inside." The door creaked open with a loud groan, revealing a dimly lit interior filled with dust and debris. Shattered furniture lay scattered across the floor, and the air smelled of mildew and decay. Daniel moved cautiously, sweeping the room with his weapon raised. To his relief, there were no signs of recent activity, only the remnants of a forgotten battle. Emily wandered over to a toppled desk, brushing away layers of dirt to reveal a cracked communication console. "Can you fix this?" she asked hopefully. Daniel knelt beside her, inspecting the device. Its wiring was frayed and several components were missing, but it wasn't beyond repair. "Give me a few minutes," he said, pulling tools from his belt. As Daniel worked, Emily explored the rest of the room, searching for anything useful. She found a dusty crate tucked in the corner, its contents spilling out onto the floor. Inside were ration packs, medical supplies, and a pair of binoculars. Her eyes widened with excitement. "Daniel," she called, "look what I found." He glanced up briefly, managing a small smile. "Good work. We'll need all the help we can get." Minutes later, the console flickered to life, emitting a series of static-filled beeps. Daniel adjusted the frequency until a familiar voice crackled through the speakers. "Unidentified transmission detected. This is Captain Rachel Dawson of the orbital station. Identify yourself." "It's me, Rachel," Daniel said, leaning closer to the microphone. "I'm alive." There was a long pause, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Daniel, we thought, are you hurt? Where are you?" "I'm fine, for now," he replied. "I'm at an old outpost about 30 clicks north of the Krill facility. I've got someone with me, a civilian named Emily Shaw. She helped me take down the weapon." Rachel's tone turned urgent. "Listen carefully, Daniel. The Krill have mobilized reinforcements. They're heading your way. You need to get out of there immediately." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Understood. Can you send extraction?" "We're already en route," Rachel assured him. "Hold tight. We'll be there in 20 minutes. As the transmission ended, Daniel turned to Emily. "Help is coming, but we're not safe yet. The Krill are closing in." Emily swallowed, hard, clutching the strap of the medical kit she'd salvaged. "What do we do?" "We make sure they don't catch us," Daniel said, standing up. "Come on, let's find higher ground." They climbed one of the nearby hills, using its vantage point to monitor the surrounding area. From their position, they could see the faint glimmer of lights in the distance. Krill vehicles speeding across the plains like angry insects swarming their prey. "They're fast," Emily muttered, gripping the binoculars tightly. "Too fast." Daniel nodded, his expression grim. "We won't outrun them on foot. We'll have to hold them off until Rachel arrives." He led Emily back down the hill to a narrow ridge that formed a natural choke point. Setting up makeshift barricades with rocks and scrap metal, he positioned himself behind cover, weapon ready. Emily crouched beside him, holding the medical kit like a shield. "You don't have to fight," Daniel told her gently. "If things go south, run for the dropship when it gets here." "No," Emily said firmly. "You saved my life. I'm not leaving yours." Before Daniel could argue, the sound of engines grew louder. The first wave of Krill vehicles appeared, skidding, to a halt at the base of the ridge. Soldiers poured out, their weapons trained on the humans above. "Here we go," Daniel muttered, raising his rifle. The firefight erupted with a deafening roar. Energy bolts streaked through the air, striking the barricades and sending shards of rock flying. Daniel fired back with precision, taking down several Krill before ducking behind cover to reload. Emily stayed low, handing him fresh magazines and keeping watch for flanking movements. Despite being outnumbered, Daniel's training gave him the edge. Every shot counted, every movement deliberate. But the krill kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Just as Daniel began to worry they wouldn't last much longer, the distant hum of engines signaled the arrival of human reinforcements. A sleek dropship descended from the sky, its thrusters kicking up clouds of dust. Laser turrets mounted on its underside opened fire, scattering the krill forces. The distraction gave Daniel and Emily the opening they needed. "Now!" Daniel shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. They sprinted toward the dropship, dodging stray blasts as they went. Rachel Dawson stood at the open hatch waving them aboard. "Get in," she yelled over the noise. Daniel shoved Emily inside, then leapt in after her just as the dropship lifted off. Below, the krill regrouped, firing futilely at the retreating craft. As the ship soared into the sky, Daniel collapsed onto the floor, his body trembling with exhaustion. Emily sat beside him, tears streaming down her face. Not from fear, but from relief. "We made it," she whispered. "For now," Daniel replied, his voice heavy with resolve. "But the krill aren't done with us, not by a long shot." Rachel knelt beside them, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You did good, Daniel. Both of you. Now rest. We'll handle the rest." But as the dropship disappeared into the stars, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The krill had lost this battle, but the war was far from over. The dropship hummed softly as it ascended higher into the atmosphere, leaving behind the desolate alien planet and the chaos below. Inside, the air was tense, but tinged with relief. Daniel Harper leaned against the cold metal wall, his breathing slow and deliberate as he tried to steady his racing heart. Emily Shaw sat nearby, clutching a blanket someone had given her, her wide eyes fixed on the floor. Rachel Dawson stood by the cockpit, speaking quietly with the pilot while keeping one hand resting on her holstered weapon. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the faint vibrations of the engines and the occasional crackle of static from the ship's communication system. It was a fragile peace, earned at great cost, and everyone aboard knew it wouldn't last long. Rachel finally turned away from the cockpit and approached Daniel. She crouched down in front of him, studying his face with concern. "You look like hell," she said bluntly, though there was warmth in her voice. "How bad are you hurt?" Daniel shrugged, wincing slightly as he shifted his weight. "I've been worse, just need some rest." Rachel didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. "We'll get you patched up once we're back on the orbital station. For now, tell me everything. What happened down there? And who's your friend?" Daniel gestured toward Emily, who looked up hesitantly. "This is Emily Shaw. She was captured during the krill raid on New Haven. Without her help, I wouldn't have made it out alive." Emily offered a small, nervous smile. "I didn't do much. Mostly just pointed him in the right direction." "Don't sell yourself short," Daniel said firmly. "You saved my life more than once." Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Sounds like quite the story. We'll debrief properly later. Right now, let's focus on getting home." Home, however, wasn't exactly safe either. As the dropship broke through the planet's thin atmosphere and entered orbit, the view outside the windows revealed the stark reality of their situation. The krill fleet loomed ominously in the distance, its ships dark and menacing against the backdrop of stars. Though they hadn't pursued the dropship directly, their presence was a constant reminder that humanity's fight was far from over. Back on the orbital station, the crew worked quickly to process the newcomers. Medical staff whisked Emily away for a checkup, promising to reunite her with Daniel once she'd been cleared. Meanwhile, Daniel followed Rachel to the command center where a holographic display showed the positions of both human and krill forces in real time. "We've got a problem," Rachel said as they stepped inside. "The krill aren't retreating. In fact, they're regrouping. Intelligence suggests they're planning another attack, this time on a larger scale." Daniel frowned, leaning closer to examine the display. "Do we know where?" Rachel hesitated, then pointed to a blinking red dot on the map. "New Haven. They're targeting the same colony they hit before." Daniel's stomach sank. New Haven wasn't just any colony. It was home to thousands of civilians, many of whom had already suffered under Krill raids. If the aliens attacked, again, the loss of life would be catastrophic. "We can't let that happen," Daniel said firmly. "We need to reinforce the colony. Send troops, supplies, anything we can spare." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "I agree. But Command isn't convinced. They think committing resources to defend New Haven will stretch us too thin. They want us to focus on protecting our own stations instead." "That's insane," Daniel snapped, slamming his fist on the console. "If we lose New Haven, it won't just be a colony. It'll be a message, a warning to every other settlement that resistance is futile." Rachel placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "I know. Trust me, I've argued the same point. But without hard evidence of the Krill's plans, it's hard to convince them." Daniel straightened, his expression grim. "Then we'll give them evidence." "What do you mean?" Rachel asked cautiously. "I mean we go back," Daniel replied. "Back to the planet. There has to be something left in that facility. Data, schematics, anything that proves the Krill are planning another attack. If we can retrieve it, we can use it to sway Command." Rachel stared at him, disbelief written across her face. "Are you serious? The place is crawling with Krill reinforcements. You barely made it out alive the first time." "I don't see another option," Daniel said evenly. "If we don't act now, those people on New Haven are as good as dead." Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. She knew Daniel well enough to recognize the determination in his eyes. Once he set his mind to something, there was no changing it. Instead, she sighed deeply and nodded. "All right," she said reluctantly. "But you're not going alone. I'm coming with you." "No," Daniel said immediately. "You're needed here. Someone has to keep Command in line while I'm gone." Rachel crossed her arms, clearly unhappy. "Fine. But take a team with you, at least 3 others. No arguments." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Fair enough." Later that evening, Daniel met with the team Rachel had assembled for the mission. There was Marcus Hale, a young but capable engineer, Sophia Martinez, a seasoned medic with nerves of steel, and Greg Owens, a grizzled veteran with years of combat experience under his belt. Together they reviewed the plan: infiltrate the ruins of the Krill facility, retrieve any remaining data, and get out before the enemy realized they were there. They prepared to depart. Emily approached Daniel, looking uncertain. "You're going back, aren't you?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "It's the only way to stop them from attacking New Haven. But don't worry. You'll be safe here." Emily shook her head. "I want to help. I know the layout of the facility better than anyone else. Let me come with you." Daniel frowned, torn between gratitude and concern. "It's too dangerous. You've done enough." "You told me earlier that courage doesn't mean not being afraid," Emily countered. "It means doing what needs to be done even when you are. Please, Daniel, let me do this." After a long pause, Daniel relented. "All right. But you stick close to me, understand?" Emily nodded eagerly. "Understood." The journey back to the planet was quiet, each member of the team lost in their own thoughts. When they landed, the landscape seemed eerily unchanged since their last visit, except for the increased number of Krill patrols sweeping the area. The group moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows and avoiding detection as they made their way toward the ruins of the facility. Inside, the wreckage was extensive. The reactor explosion had collapsed large sections of the structure, burying equipment and debris under tons of rubble. Despite the damage, traces of the Krill's work remained intact. Charred computer terminals, fragmented data drives, and partially destroyed files scattered throughout the corridors. Marcus set to work immediately, using his tools to extract usable information from the damaged systems. Sophia kept watch, her rifle ready in case of ambush, while Greg and Emily scouted ahead to clear potential threats. Daniel coordinated their efforts, ensuring everyone stayed focused and alert. Hours passed in tense silence. Progress was slow, but steady. By the time Marcus announced he'd recovered enough data to prove the Krill's intentions, the team was exhausted, but hopeful. "We've got what we came for," Marcus said, holding up a portable drive. "Let's get out of here." But as they turned to leave, a low rumble echoed through the tunnels. The ground trembled beneath their feet, sending chunks of rock tumbling from the ceiling. Alarms blared overhead, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of Krill soldiers closing in. "They found us," Greg growled, raising his weapon. Daniel cursed under his breath. "Fall back. Stick together." The team sprinted through the collapsing facility, dodging falling debris and returning fire whenever necessary. Emily stumbled at one point, nearly getting crushed by a falling beam, but Daniel caught her arm and pulled her along. Just as it seemed they might escape, a massive Krill warrior blocked their path, a towering brute clad in heavy armor wielding a pulsating energy blade. Its multifaceted eyes glowed with fury as it roared, charging directly at them. "Take cover!" Daniel shouted, firing repeatedly at the creature. The shots bounced harmlessly off its thick exoskeleton, forcing the team to scatter. Sophia threw a smoke grenade, creating a temporary distraction that allowed them to regroup. "We can't fight that thing head-on," Greg said urgently. "We need another way around." "There is no other way," Daniel replied grimly. "It's blocking the exit." Before anyone could respond, Emily stepped forward, clutching a small explosive charge she'd scavenged earlier. "Distract it," she said firmly. "I'll handle this." "Emily." "No," Daniel protested, reaching for her. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face but resolve shining in her eyes. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. Now it's my turn to return the favor." Without waiting for a response, Emily darted into the smoke, drawing the Krill warrior's attention. Her scream pierced the air moments later, followed by a deafening explosion that shook the entire facility. When the dust settled, the team found themselves standing in stunned silence. The Krill warrior was gone, reduced to ash and twisted metal. Emily lay motionless on the ground, her body broken but her sacrifice undeniable. Daniel knelt beside her, grief overwhelming him. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered hoarsely. Sophia placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She saved us, Daniel. We owe it to her to finish this." Nodding numbly, Daniel stood and led the team toward the exit. Every step felt heavier than the last, but they pressed on, driven by the memory of Emily's bravery. The dropship hovered above the alien planet, its engines roaring as it descended to pick up Daniel Harper and his team. The battered group stood in silence, their faces streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Each step they took toward the ship felt heavier than the last, weighed down not just by physical fatigue but by the loss they had endured. Emily Shaw's sacrifice lingered in their minds like a shadow. Her final moments played over and over again in Daniel's head, her voice steady, despite her fear, her determination unwavering even as she ran toward certain death. She had given everything to ensure their survival, and now her absence left a void that no words could fill. As the ramp lowered and the team climbed aboard, Rachel Dawson greeted them with a mixture of relief and concern. "You made it," she said softly, though her eyes scanned the group for signs of injury, or worse. When she realized Emily wasn't among them, her expression darkened. "Where's Emily?" Rachel asked, dread creeping into her tone. Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening before he answered. "She didn't make it, but because of her, we got what we needed." Rachel nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his words. There would be time to mourn later. For now, survival was their priority. "Get strapped in," she instructed. "We need to get out of here before the Krill reinforcements arrive." The dropship lifted off, leaving behind the crumbling ruins of the facility and the chaos below. As they ascended into orbit, the view outside the windows revealed the stark reality of their situation. The Krill fleet loomed larger than ever, its ships forming an ominous blockade around the planet. Though they hadn't pursued the dropship directly, their presence was a constant reminder that humanity's fight was far from over. Back on the orbital station, the atmosphere was tense. The crew worked quickly to process the data Marcus had recovered from the facility, piecing together fragments of information to form a clearer picture of the Krill's plans. It wasn't long before the truth became undeniable. "They're building something massive," Marcus explained as he displayed the findings on a holographic screen in the command center. a weapon designed to target human DNA specifically. If deployed, it could wipe out entire colonies within days. Rachel stared at the schematics, her face pale. This isn't just an attack, it's extermination. Daniel nodded grimly. Exactly. And if we don't stop them, New Haven is only the beginning. But how do we stop them? Sophia asked, speaking up for the first time since returning from the mission. Her voice was quiet but firm. Their fleet outnumbers us 10-1. Even if we warn New Haven, they won't stand a chance against that kind of firepower. Greg Owens leaned forward, his weathered face lined with frustration. We hit them where it hurts, their supply lines. Without resources, they can't build or maintain their weapons. It's not enough, Daniel countered. If we focus solely on sabotage, they'll adapt. We need to take the fight to them, directly. Rachel crossed her arms, considering the options. Command still won't authorize a full-scale assault. They think it's too risky. And sitting back while the Krill prepared genocide isn't, Daniel snapped, his patience wearing thin. We've got proof now, solid evidence of their intentions. If Command won't act, then we will. Rachel sighed deeply, knowing he was right. Fine. But we'll need a plan. A good one. Something bold enough to catch them off guard. Daniel's eyes narrowed as an idea began to form. What if we use their own arrogance against them? The next several hours were spent refining the strategy. The team gathered in the command center, poring over maps, schematics, and intelligence reports. By the time they finished, they had a risky but potentially game-changing plan. We infiltrate their flagship, Daniel explained, pointing to the largest vessel in the Krill fleet on the holographic display. It's the nerve center of their operation. If we can disable it, the rest of the fleet will fall into disarray. That's suicide, Greg muttered, shaking his head. Even if we manage to sneak aboard, how do we get past their defenses? We don't sneak, Daniel replied. We go in loud and fast. Create enough chaos to draw their attention while a smaller team sabotages the core systems. Rachel frowned, clearly uneasy about the risks involved. Who's going in? I am, Daniel said without hesitation. And I'll take Sophia and Marcus with me. Greg, you stay here and coordinate with Rachel. Keep the fleet ready in case things go south. Greg opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. He knew Daniel well enough to recognize the resolve in his voice. Once he made a decision, there was no changing his mind. Fine, Greg said reluctantly. But if you don't come back, I'm holding you personally responsible. Daniel managed, a small smile. Deal. Preparations for the mission moved swiftly. The team suited up in stealth gear equipped with cloaking devices, ensuring they could move undetected until the critical moment. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Ammunition, loaded, and escape routes mapped out in painstaking detail. Before departing, Rachel pulled Daniel aside. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Once you're inside, there's no turning back. I'm sure, Daniel replied firmly. If we succeed, it'll buy us the time we need to warn the colonies and mount a proper defense. If we fail, well, at least we'll have gone down fighting. Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. Just promise me one thing. Come back alive. I'll try, Daniel said with a faint smile. Then, turning serious, he added, take care of the others. Make sure Emily's sacrifice means something. Rachel nodded, blinking back tears. I will. The infiltration began under the cover of darkness. Using a stolen Krill shuttle, Daniel, Sophia, and Marcus approached the flagship undetected, blending seamlessly with the other vessels in the fleet. As they docked, the trio activated their cloaking devices and slipped into the ship unnoticed. Inside, the flagship was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, bustling with activity. Krill soldiers marched in tight formations. Technicians worked tirelessly at control panels, and massive machines hummed with energy. The air was thick with tension, a clear sign that the aliens were preparing for war. Moving cautiously, the team made their way toward the central command hub. Along the way, they encountered several patrols, but their cloaking devices allowed them to slip past without detection. Despite the high stakes, Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The Krill had always underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. When they finally reached the command hub, Marcus set to work immediately, hacking into the ship's systems. His fingers flew across the console as lines of code scrolled across the screen. "I've accessed their targeting protocols," he whispered excitedly. "If I upload this virus, it'll scramble their weapon systems and leave them vulnerable." "It," Daniel ordered. As Marcus worked, Sophia kept watch, her rifle ready in case of ambush. Suddenly, alarms blared overhead, shattering the silence. Red lights flashed throughout the room as Krill soldiers poured in, weapons raised. "No, we're here!" Sophia shouted, firing a burst of shots to hold them off. "Almost done!" Marcus yelled, his hands trembling as he completed the upload. Daniel joined Sophia, laying down suppressive fire to give Marcus the time he needed. The Krill fought fiercely, their superior numbers threatening to overwhelm the humans. But Daniel refused to yield, his movements precise and calculated as he took down enemy after enemy. Finally, Marcus let out a triumphant shout. "Got it! The virus is uploaded. Time to go." Daniel barked, grabbing Marcus and pulling him toward the exit. The trio sprinted through the corridors, dodging blasts and returning fire as they went. Behind them, the flagship began to malfunction. The lights flickered, machinery ground to a halt, and panicked shouts echoed through the halls. Chaos spread like wildfire, exactly as Daniel had hoped. Reaching the hangar bay, they leapt aboard their stolen shuttle and blasted off just as the flagship erupted in flames. From a safe distance, they watched as the once mighty vessel collapsed, in on itself, taking countless Krill soldiers with it. "Well," Marcus said breathlessly, slumping into his seat. "That went better than expected." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Speak for yourself. I'm pretty sure I aged 10 years in the last hour." Daniel allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. For the first time in what felt like forever, they had struck a decisive blow against the Krill. But he knew better than to celebrate prematurely. This victory was only temporary. The war was far from over. As the shuttle docked back at the orbital station, Rachel greeted them with a mix of relief and admiration. "You did it," she said simply. "The fleet's in disarray. We've bought ourselves some time." Daniel nodded, his expression somber. "But not enough. The Krill will regroup, and when they do, they'll come at us harder than ever." Rachel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "For now, let's focus on what matters. Warning the colonies and preparing for the next fight. One step at a time." Daniel glanced at the stars outside the window, his thoughts drifting to Emily and all the others who had sacrificed everything for humanity's survival. Their bravery wouldn't be forgotten, not as long as he drew breath. "We'll keep fighting," he said quietly, "no matter what." And with that, the team turned their attention to the battles yet to come, united in their resolve to protect the fragile hope that remained. Weeks passed after the destruction of the Krill flagship, and though the victory had been significant, it was only a small step in the larger war. The orbital station buzzed with activity as crews worked tirelessly to repair damaged ships, gather intelligence, and prepare for the inevitable retaliation. Despite the constant pressure, there was a sense of cautious optimism among the humans, a belief that they could hold their ground against even the most formidable enemies. Daniel Harper stood in the command center, staring at the holographic display showing the positions of both human and Krill forces. The map was dotted with red markers indicating Krill ships regrouping near their home planet. It was clear they were rebuilding their fleet, but for now, humanity had a brief window of opportunity. Rachel Dawson approached him, her expression serious. "We've sent warnings to all the colonies," she said. "New Haven is fortifying its defenses, and other settlements are evacuating civilians to safer locations." "That's good," Daniel replied, his voice low. "But it's not enough. We need to hit them again, harder this time." Rachel crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "You're already planning your next move, aren't you?" Daniel nodded. "The Krill won't stop until we force them to. If we can strike at their homeworld, we might cripple their ability to wage war." Rachel sighed, shaking her head. "Command will never approve an attack like that. It's too risky." We don't need their approval, Daniel said firmly. We've proven before that bold actions save lives. Besides, if we wait for command to make decisions, it'll be too late. Rachel hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. All right, but you're not doing this alone. I'm coming with you. No, Daniel said immediately. You're needed, here. Someone has to keep things running while we're gone. Rachel frowned but didn't argue further. She knew Daniel was right, even if she didn't like it. Instead, she focused on helping him assemble a team for the mission. Marcus Hale and Sofia Martinez volunteered without hesitation, eager to continue fighting alongside Daniel. Greg Owens stayed behind to coordinate efforts on the station, ensuring the rest of the fleet remained ready for action. The journey to the Krill homeworld was long and tense. The team traveled aboard a modified stealth ship designed to avoid detection by Krill sensors. For days, they drifted silently through space, monitoring enemy communications and gathering intel. The closer they got to their destination, the more dangerous the mission became. When they finally arrived, the sight of the Krill homeworld filled the view screen, a massive, barren planet surrounded by towering spires of metal and glass. The capital city sprawled across the surface like a scar, its industrial complexes belching smoke into the sky. Thousands of ships orbited the planet, forming a dense defensive perimeter. This is insane, Marcus muttered, staring at the screen. There's no way we can get through that. We don't have to, Daniel said calmly. We target their central command hub. It's heavily guarded, but if we disable it, the entire operation will collapse. Sofia raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do we do that without getting blown to pieces? Daniel smiled faintly. By being unpredictable. The plan was simple yet daring. Infiltrate the planet's atmosphere using a stolen Krill shuttle, disguise themselves as part of the enemy fleet, and sabotage the command hub from within. It was risky, but the element of surprise gave them a fighting chance. As they descended toward the surface, the team activated their cloaking devices, blending seamlessly with the bustling traffic of shuttles and transports. No alarm sounded. No patrols intercepted them. They slipped past the defenses as if they belonged. Once on the ground, they moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding patrols. The streets of the capital city were eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from distant machinery and the occasional patrol. The air smelled metallic, tinged with the sharp scent of burning fuel. Reaching the command hub required navigating a maze of narrow alleys and underground tunnels. Along the way, the team encountered several obstacles, locked doors, security drones, and even a group of Krill soldiers, but they overcame each challenge with skill and determination. Finally, they reached their destination, a towering structure at the heart of the city, its walls lined with glowing conduits and pulsating energy cores. Inside, technicians scurried about, monitoring screens and adjusting controls. The hum of machinery filled the air, almost deafening. This is it, Daniel whispered. Marcus, get to work. Sofia, cover him. Marcus nodded, pulling out his hacking tools and attaching them to a nearby terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as he worked, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Sofia stood beside him, weapon raised, scanning the room for threats. Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Just as Marcus announced he was nearly done, alarms blared overhead. Red lights flashed throughout the room as Krill soldiers poured in, weapons drawn. They know we're here, Sofia shouted, firing a burst of shots to hold them off. Almost there, Marcus yelled, sweat dripping down his face. Daniel joined Sofia, laying down suppressive fire to give Marcus the time he needed. The Krill fought fiercely, their numbers threatening to overwhelm the humans, but Daniel refused to give up, his movements precise and calculated as he took down enemy after enemy. Finally, Marcus let out a triumphant shout. Done! The system's overloaded! Time to go, Daniel barked, grabbing Marcus and pulling him toward the exit. The trio sprinted through the corridors, dodging blasts and returning fire as they went. Behind them, the command hub began to malfunction. The lights flickered, machinery ground to a halt, and panicked shouts echoed through the halls. Chaos spread like wildfire, exactly as Daniel had hoped. Reaching the hangar bay, they leapt aboard their stolen shuttle and blasted off just as the command hub erupted in flames. From a safe distance, they watched as the once mighty structure collapsed in on itself, taking countless Krill soldiers with it. "Well," Marcus said breathlessly, slumping into his seat. "That went better than expected." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Speak for yourself. I'm pretty sure I aged 10 years in the last hour." Daniel allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. For the second time in recent memory, they had struck a decisive blow against the Krill, but he knew better than to celebrate prematurely. This victory was only temporary. The war was far from over. Back on the orbital station, the crew greeted the team with cheers and applause. Rachel embraced Daniel tightly, relief washing over her face. "You did it," she said simply. "The Krill are in disarray. We've bought ourselves some time." Daniel nodded, his expression somber. "But not enough. The Krill will regroup, and when they do, they'll come at us harder than ever." Rachel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "For now, let's focus on what matters, warning the colonies and preparing for the next fight, one step at a time." Later that evening, Daniel visited the memorial wall dedicated to fallen soldiers. He paused in front of Emily Shaw's name, etched into the smooth surface alongside others who had given everything for the cause. His heart ached with grief, but also with gratitude for her courage, her sacrifice, and the legacy she had left behind. As he stood there, lost in thought, a message appeared on his wrist communicator. It was from Command, relaying new intelligence about Krill activity in uncharted space. Another threat loomed on the horizon, one that would require all of humanity's strength and ingenuity to overcome. With a deep breath, Daniel straightened, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. He glanced back at the memorial one last time, then turned and walked away, heading toward the shuttle bay. Humanity may have been outnumbered and outgunned, but as long as people like Daniel existed, hope would never die.